Hi guys, I'm super excited. Um, okay, so um, it's gonna get real exciting today. Okay, so y'all hang back and hold on. Put on your seatbelts. Put your tray tables in their upright position, and let's go. Okay, put your seats in tray tables in their upright position. All right, so here we go. I do want to give a shout out to Simon and Schuster again for allowing us to post this video online during our global pandemic and our distance learning. So thank you to them. Super nice. They don't have to do that, but they're good people, so we're all good. All right, so here we go. Today is chapters 42 and 43, and they're so good. Okay. Without further ado, chapter 42. It rhymed. Sorry, guys. I'm actually reading this right now at 5 o'clock on Friday, and it's been a long week, so I'm a little silly. So, it's normal Miss Wood. So just hang out with me, okay? Hang out with me on a Friday afternoon for your Monday lesson. Chapter 42. Thursday, January 16th through Saturday, January 18th, 1777. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's in our Declaration of Independence, guys. So this goes back to that reoccurring theme that we have working with what she likes to talk about with the freedoms that she talks often. Let me adding the word theme right there. Okay. Dr. Destage visited Lady Seymour each morning and eve. She could nod her head yes and shake it no to his questions. Yes, she knew who she was. No, she had no sensation in her feet nor her hands. She could barely chew milk-soaked bread and sip broth. Her mind had not gone soft, though. Her eyes blazed bright in her skull and followed me as I moved around the room. When the doctor and Madame talked, she listened right close. Plainly, she was as much a prisoner in her broken body as Curzon was in his cell. That's heavy. That's really heavy, guys. We hold ourselves prisoner from mistakes we make and things, and it's definitely kind of what's going on. Madame's seamstress came near as frequent as the doctor. The birthday ball gown had a scarlet red underskirt, topped with a short gown of royal navy blue and embroidered with gold. The hairdresser and Madame spent hours consulting prints of fashionable ladies in Paris so they could design a suitable hairstyle. I was not privy to the details, but I heard Madame talking about jewels made of paste that would sit atop her curls. She also wanted a small British flag to fly atop her locks. But the hairdresser talked her out of it. Thank goodness, I would have been tacky. Hannah and Mary talked about the ball every waking minute. I am sure that the Queen herself would have grown tired of hearing about it. At noon, the guns at the battery, which the British had taken to calling Fort George, would fire a royal salute. An hour later, the warships in the harbor would blast a response. At 6 o'clock, the guest would arrive at the ball with trumpets playing and drums beating a welcome. The dancing would last until midnight, when the fireworks would explode over the harbor. After that, the banquet would begin. There was no way in heaven that Madame would survive 6 hours of dancing without having something to eat. I finished reading Common Sense the night before the ball. The bookseller was right. The words were dangerous. Every one of them. I ought to throw it in the fire, but I could not bring myself to do it. Mr. Payne knew how to stir up the pot. He went right after the king and attacked the crown on his head. Guys, I wrote on my side margin that words are often the basis of war, and Payne incited action through his words. So what I'm not going to do on this, I'm not going to show you the pages right now. I will stop and talk periodically, because I really don't want to interrupt the continuity of these pages, so we will just have to mark them later. I laid down one long road of sentence in my remembering. For all men, being originally equals, no one by birth could have a right to set up his own family in perpetual preference to all others forever. Way I saw it, Mr. Paine was saying that all people were the same, that no one deserved to wear a crown or was born to be higher than another. That's why America could make its own freedom. That's a lesson, guys. That's a lot. There's a lot to unpack in that. We'll do that in class. 'Twas a wonder the book did not explode into flames in my hands. I buried it back in its hidey hole, and I lay myself down to sleep. But my eyes would not close. My thoughts were churned up like muddy water, with dangerous eels thrashing through it. Remember the eels from her previous dream? If an entire nation could seek its freedom, why not a girl? And if a girl was to seek her freedom, how could she do such a foolhardy thing? Especially a girl trapped in New York. Best thing would be to break into the desk of a British commander and steal a pass and forge her name and his name on it and act free. Remember, there's a British commander living in her house right now. And pigs were likely to fly too. Plus, that girl seeking freedom would have to walk. She would walk the mile from Wall Street to the north edge of the city, but then she would run into guards stationed there. She would have to sneak past them, and she might get shot. Then she'd have 11 miles of running to the north edge of the island. If she took the Greenwich Road or the Post Road, she'd likely be captured by one in need of a slave or in need of a reward paid for a healthy runaway. If she stuck to the woods that ran up the center of the island, she would be hit by a bear or drowned by in the swamp. If angels guided her safe through the woods and she made her way to the north's edge, she'd have to get past the guards watching over King's Bridge, where New York Island touched the rest of America. I rolled over, my back on fire, my back to the fire. The girl could more likely grab hold of the feet of a passing crow and bid him to fly her to safety. Better yet, sprout wings of her own. So guys, she's daydreaming about this. She's kind of planning it out in her head, but then thinking, okay, can't really do it. The only path left was over the water. A girl like that could not swim and did not own a boat. Not to mention the river currents were fast and the crossing would be noted by someone who would raise a ruckus, and then the soldiers would line up like a firing squad and shoot the girl dead in the water. They wouldn't even bury her proper. They would just let the water take the boat and the body, and both would be consumed by sea monsters. I fell asleep cursing them I fell asleep cursing them that planted the city of New York on an island. All right, so I like that. I'm writing myself a note. I have a question for the author here. Okay. My dawn visits up the commons had become the most ordinary of errands. Madam never woke early enough to note my absence, and the soldier wives were so grateful to avoid the chore, they never told. Curzon had grown terribly thin and was still feverish, but his leg had healed up. He greeted me at the window every day. After I left the prison, I'd fetch the water and head back to Wall Street, passing by the Golden Hill Tavern in case Captain Morse needed me, which he never ever did. So when the captain signaled me from the tavern porch the next morning, I was surprised. I had not seen him for weeks, not since the news of the rebel victory at Trenton. Just good day, just Sal, he said with a sleepy smile. How'd he fare? Good enough, sir. Is something amiss? He winced and pulled his coat tighter. Nothing grave, no news of battle or a prisoner exchange. I waited while he sought the words. I am in need of a favor, he finally said. It's of no worldly import, but it's of matter to me. Sir, I must repay a debt, just Sal. I wagered Captain William Farrar that the British would not dare hold this ridiculous birthday celebration. It's a slap in the face to the people who are starving. Yes, sir. He frowned and kicked at a stone, poking halfway up in the frozen mud. But I have been proven wrong, aren't I? Thousands of pounds are being wasted, so I owe my friend, Captain Farrar, a penny. A gentleman always pays his debts promptly. whether they be large or small. I was confuddled. And you want that I should? He threw up his hands in frustration. The British have confined all American officers to their lodging houses today. Why? They fear we might mount an insurrection while they are dancing minuets and gorging on stuffed goose. They have a point. The ball would provide the perfect cover for a surprise attack if Washington were nearby. So I am prevented from making good on my bet to William, and he is prevented from coming around to collect what is due. 'Tis a small matter of honor, to be sure, but when we're in reduced circumstances, these things take on greater weight. Don't you think? Still confuddled, I nodded my head. Yes, sir. Good! Then you'll do it. Do what? Take the penny to William, with my salutations. It will give him a good laugh. He lives on Chapel Street, the house with the red shutters, on the corner of Warren. Say you'll do it for me, just Sal, and the next penny I earn goes into your pocket, upon my word. Madam would be wig deep in preparations for the ball all day. The soldiers' wives would too, for they belonged to an army of servants who would work at the birthday dinner. Lady Seymour only required a warm fire and an occasional help with a teacup. A walk to Warren Street on a sunny day such as this would be most welcome. Happy to help, Captain, she said. The roar of cannon shook the kitchen just after midday, and it made me jump out of my skin. I dropped the turnip I was peeling, and it rolled across the floor. What was that? I said as I clutched the table. Are we under attack? Hannah laughed and used the poker to push the logs back up to the back of the hearth. No, you goose, that's the royal salute for Her Majesty. Mary pressed the hot iron against the apron on the table. Do you figure they might need us early? The Major said 5 o'clock, Hannah said. Gives us time to finish up here. Will you get to see the dancing? I asked. Nah, said Mary. They'll be too busy running us ragged setting up the dinner. But they've promised to feed us good. She picked up the apron and studied it for wrinkles. I wish my mother could see this. Me, serving at a queen's birthday ball. Too bad your mother's on the other side of the globe with Her Majesty, Hannah said. They'll both be tragically late to the party, Mary giggled. Madam sent a note to her friend, Jane Drinkwater, who had agreed to bring her collection of necklaces and the latest gossip to tea. The news caused Madam to send the soldiers' wives pawing through the attic for a gown that she had not worn this year. Hannah sent me to fetch more water, which I did with great pleasure and a short detour. All right, so guys, remember she's got to bring the guy the penny. The houses on Warren Street were a mix. Some were modest, 2 or 3 were rather grand with arches over the windows and fancy boot scrapers by the front door. The trees and fences in the neighborhood had all been cut down for firewood. It made the corner of Warren and Chapel look underdressed. I went around the back of the house with the red shutters, knocked on the door, and explained my errand to the maid, who fetched Captain Farrar for me. Sorry, guys. Oh, my goodness. A horse-faced man with an easy laugh. Oh, good Captain Morrison is indeed a gentleman, he said, as I presented him with the coin. And you are the girl who carries the messages to his men in Bridewell. There's a lot of people know her. Yes, sir. My lads are locked up in the old sugar house, he said, his smile fading, the one still alive. He stood there, caught up in silence and in his own thoughts. I tried to think of a polite way to take my leave, but I could not find the proper words. The breeze came along from the south and carried a salt tang with it. Although snow lay about, everyone was wrapped deep in their clothing. The appearance of clouds made a body know deep down that spring was stirring. Yes, sir, I finally said, begging pardon, but I must be on my way. Of course, his eyes still distant. I walked down the path to Warren Street, and I stopped when I heard him call me. Sal, wait there a moment. I stood a while longer watching the clouds and scolding myself for mixing in with the affairs of gentlemen in their honor. Several carriages containing bundled-up ladies and serious-looking officers passed along the street, pulled by shaggy-coated horses. Most folks took no notice of me. any more notice of me than they would a cartman selling oysters or a vagabond from Canvastown. Most folks wouldn't have noticed me, which means somebody might. Just as I set my mind to leave, Captain Farrar came back out. "Give this to Morse, please," he said as he handed me the note. "He'll know what to do." I studied the folded paper and made bold. "Another wager, sir?" Another carriage passed on the street, the horses clip-clopping slow. All right. I put a marginal note here, and I'm going to stop and read this to you. Guys, she is talking to a rebel patriot and an officer. Remember that they are forced to wear different clothes, so they stand out. Then the author writes, "most folks." That means some folks notice, like I said. And the last carriage moves by slowly. That's a big uh-oh. He shook his head, laughter gone from his eyes. "No, news from headquarters. Don't tarry with it, though." He touched his fingertips to the brim of his hat. I bobbed a curtsy, and then I took my leave, hurrying toward the tea water pump. I should have known I would be pressed into more message carrying. These soldier types are forever scheming up one thing or another, and it put a girl like me in a rough spot. Not that they ever thought about that. I didn't ask to ferry messages across the city for some captain that I did not know. How was that connected to my deal with Dibdin to treat Curzon proper? It was not one bit. The good Captain Morrison Farrar would have to wait until it suited me for this last message to be delivered. If I didn't get back soon, I'd be in for it. I pushed through the back door into Lockton's kitchen, still fussing with the selfish captains who only thought of their own skins. When Curzon got out, he'd have a debt of honor the size of a whale to me. I'd make that boy. I set down the water buckets, removed my cloak. So she's kind of lost in her own world, guys. She's just kind of thinking about the future. I set down the water buckets, I removed my cloak, and I hung it from a peg near the fire. I stood rubbing my hands together and warming them over the flames. As soon as I could move them, I'd boil up the water. The door from the front hall slammed open. "There you are." The words came at me like shards of glass. I turned. 'Twas Madame Lockton holding a small riding crop in her hand. "Ma'am?" She crossed the room and slashed the crop across my face. It hurt fierce, but I knew not to cry out. "How dare you?" she spat. Chapter 43. Guys, we don't know what Madam knows, but Isabel still has that note in her pocket. Remember, she didn't deliver the note. She said, "I'll deliver it when I want to." So that note is still in her pocket. Okay. Saturday, January 18th, 1777. That even a failure cannot be more fatal than to remain in our present situation. In short, some enterprise that must be undertaken in our present circumstance, or we must give up the cause. Our affairs are hastening fast to ruin if we do not retrieve them by some happy event. Delay with us now is equal to total defeat. Colonel Joseph Reed in a letter to General Washington. "Please, ma'am," I started. "Silence!" She cracked the crop across my shoulder. A riding crop is what you use to make a horse go faster, so it hurts. The back door opened, and Hannah entered. "Oh, excuse me," she said, turning to leave again. "Stay," Madam ordered. Hannah let the door close and murmured, "Yes, madam," her eyes stealing once again to me and then quickly away. I fought the urge to run for the knife drawer. Madam paced in front of me. "I have never in my life been so humiliated." She paused and put on a mimic face. "I saw your little black girl talking to a rebel officer on Warren Street. Do you allow your slaves to consort with the enemy?" I could not swallow. nor breathe. She brought the crop down with a crack on the back of the table. Jane Drinkwater said this to me. Jane Drinkwater, the biggest gossip in all of New York. Madam paced again, her hair flying loose, her manner quite unsteady. I said, no, Jane, you must have been mistaken. Not our Sal. Colonel Hawkins uses her for errands. She stopped suddenly, and Jane says, no, Anne, your girl was speaking to a rebel prisoner on Warren Street. It's hard to miss that mark on her face. From my carriage, I saw her take a note from his hand. I opened my mouth to protest, but she slashed at me again. This time the brow opened a cut on my forehead. Give me that note, Madam demanded. I have no note, ma'am, I said quiet. She held out her hand. Liar! You give me that paper or I will turn you over to the British commander so fast your fool head would spin. Her voice shook with rage. I reached in my pocket and I pulled out the folded note. Madam looked over to Hannah. See? You just need to be firm with them. Hannah said nothing. A drop of blood rolled down the side of my face and I clutched the note in my fist. Give it! Madam narrowed her eyes. Did you hear me, girl? Everybody's carried a little evil in them. Mama once told me. Madame Lockton had more than her share. The poison had eaten holes through her soul and made room for vermin to nest inside of her. Girl! Madame stopped her foot on the floor. The evil inside me woke and cracked like lightning. I could wrap my hands around her throat. I could brain her with a poker and thrust her face into the flames. I could beat her senseless with my fist. I shook from the effort of holding myself still, clutching the crumpled paper. Mama said we had to fight the evil inside of us by overcoming it with goodness. She said it was a hard thing to do, but it made us worthy. I breathed deep to steady myself, and I threw the captain's note into the fire. Hannah gasped. Madam shrieked and pushed me out of the way. The paper was already alight. She dropped the crop and smacked me again in the face with her hand, as she had the first day that I landed in New York. Foul, bloody wench. She reached behind her, picked up a bowl, and hurled it at me. I ducked, and it crashed against the hearth. I will sell you! She screamed. I will auction you at dawn on Monday, and I will sell your demon sister too, to the most cruel, heartless master that I can find, the devil himself if he wants. She paused to catch her breath. Ruth? Hannah stepped forward. I do believe there was a knock at the front door, madam, she said. But she already sold Ruth. Madam glared at her. Then answer it, you bloody fool. Didn't she? As Hannah left, Madam brushed back her hair, gathering her dignity. I stood still by the fire, where the note had burned to fine ash, and I could not think about what might happen next. Madam tugged at her short gown. What's that stupid look on your face? She said with a harsh laugh. You didn't know that I still owned her, did you? Ruth? The name escaped my mouth. Brat, Madam spat. I couldn't find a buyer. I had to ship her down to Charleston. I shall tell the estate manager to get rid of her. Toss her in the swamp. Her death will be on your head, you insolent fool. Hannah came back from the hall. The hairdresser, madam. What? Madam wheeled about. What did you say? The hairdresser has come to prepare you for the ball. The Queen's ball, ma'am? You must leave in a few hours. Madam cleared her throat and stood straighter. Of course. You must first help me into my gown. Hannah nodded. Yes, ma'am. And lock the girl in the potato bin. Then come upstairs. The bin was more than half filled with potatoes and smelled of damp earth and worms. There was not enough room to sit up, but laying down was like laying on a bed of rocks. I wanted to scream, and I pinched myself hard to fight the urge. I did not want to give Madam any satisfaction. Overhead came the noises of footsteps as the hairdresser performed his job and left, and the colonel returned from the headquarters to change into his dress uniform, and Madam sent Hannah running for the frotterol and that. There was the sound of horse hooves and the roll of carriage wheels at the front door as the front door opened and closed and the house fell quiet except for Hannah's steps in the kitchen. A light appeared through some boards of the bin. "It's me," Hannah said. "She's gone." The light was set on the ground and there was a fumbling of a key in the padlock. The bin door opened and Hannah peered in. "I brought you some things. Here." She handed me a chamber pot, a blanket, and a mug of water. "'Tain't right that they locked you away with nothing. You ain't no animal." "Please let me go," I pleaded. But before I could say anything further or reach for her, she slammed down the door and shot home that lock again. "I'll be back by dawn, and I'll check on you then," she said. "Try to sleep." "Please, Hannah," I cried. "Please, I beg of you." The footsteps flew down the stairs, and the door slammed. I thought I heard a quick sob, but perhaps I didn't. The bees overtook me then. As evening marched into night, they ate through me and hived up inside my brain pan with a loud buzz, their wings beating me into submission. Somebody whimpered and cried. It must have been me, but it mattered not, for I was already dead. It was only a few days, hours perhaps, until my heart would stop beating. In truth, the bees would fly off to haunt someone else. And then came the sound of a distant roar, like an animal just sprung from a trap. Who's the animal? What's waking up? The bees paused, and I froze, waiting. No one was home except for Lady Seymour, and she was not capable of making that noise. The roar came again. I cocked my head, and I listened. It did not come from the street, nor the house above. It was not cannon fire. It was inside me. A thought, thunderous loud. Ruth was alive. Alive in Charleston, in South Carolina, not on a ship, not on an island. Alive in a town where I can walk to. My toes wiggled in my sturdy black shoes and my legs itched. I lay as flat as I could on the bumpy mound of potatoes and kicked at the boards of the bin. My heavy shoes did a terrible loud noise on the wood, and I stopped and I counted to 100. There came no sound from overhead, no commotion out on the street. I kicked again at the same spot. The potatoes under me shifted and the mug of water overturned. I kicked a third time. The boards did not move at all. I cursed the carpenter who had built this tomb. There has to be a way out. I kicked, I stomped, I slammed, I raged, I screamed, I fought. Nothing happened. I stomped and I wiped the sweat from my face and I closed my eyes. Think! The bin stood a little taller than Ruth and was as long in both directions as it was tall. I reached to touch the boards above my head. They were rough-hewn and put together with cold nails. Guys, I like how she measures it in the size of Ruth because she's on her mind. My fingertips traced the length of each board, feeling along the splinters and the knots in the wood. The top was solid as a brick wall, each nail fastened tight. I fought back the panic that rose in my throat, and I tested the strength of each board that ran from the top to the sides. All strong and sound. Think. Remember. When Ruth and I slept down here, the far corner of the cellar was went muddy in a heavy rain. Maybe the damp had eaten away at the boards. I moved over to the corner of the bin and I scooped the potatoes out of the way, heaping them behind me. I sat back and I pushed my feet on the board and in turn and pushed. The third board I tried gave away a little, and so did the next two. I moved the potato heap so I could best lean against it, and I pushed with my legs, and I kicked. There was a quiet crack. I kicked again, and I leaned forward to feel the boards. The one had a piece chipped off where the wood was rotted through, and the other had a long split in it. I leaned back, and I took a deep breath, and then I kicked with all of my strength until the wood broke and flew into the darkness. Guys, the only person to help Isabel at this moment is Isabel. So this is a kind of a lesson that we need to be our own heroes. Let's not wait for anybody to rescue us. Let's rescue ourselves. We can do it. It's all inside of every single one of us. Every single one of us has it in us. I took the stairs two at a time, and I paused before I entered the kitchen. The house was still silent. I hurried down the hall, past the grandfather clock, and up the stairs to the drawing room. I needed a map and a mind to steal a pass, too, if I could. Remember, she needs the pass to say that she's a free slave, so she can walk about. I threw some wood on the fire and lit the candles from the flames. I carried it to the long dining table covered with maps and countless papers. Remember how they had talked earlier about how Colonel Hawkins was really overwhelmed with work and things had gotten a little messy? So this might work to her advantage here. I lit the rest of the candles on the table as if preparing for a feast. Then I searched through the paper, throwing those that were useless to me on the floor. Finally, I found a small map that showed the colonies from Massachusetts to Georgia. The distance from Rhode Island to New York was the same as the tip of my little finger, from the first knuckle under it. From New York to Charleston reached all the way down my fingers to my palm. The crackling firewood startled me, and I glanced up. There was a movement over by the hearth, and for an instant, my heart caught in my throat. A ghost? The firelight brightened. No, not a ghost. I had caught sight of myself in a large mirror that hung over the mantel. This is cool. This is good. I'm not okay. I could scarce recognize me. My hands fumbled for a candle, and I moved to the mirror, guarding the flame, and lit the oil lamps that were set into the wall. The mirror caught the light and reflected it back at me. I leaned in. In truth, it seemed that I was looking at a stranger who lived beyond the glass. My face was thinner than I remembered and longer from brow to chin. My nose and mouth recollected Mama's, but the set of the eyes, those came from Papa. As I stared, their two faces came forth and slowly drifted back until I could only see me. Guys, what's happening here is the mirror is showing all of the changes in her. It's literally mirroring the physical changes are mirroring the mental changes that are happening inside of Isabel right now. I turned my head to the side of it and studied the brand on my face. For the first time, I studied it hard. Sorry, this is such a good part. The capital I that proclaimed my insolent manners and crimes. I leaned closer to the mirror. The letter was a pink ribbon embroidered on my skin. I touched it, and it was smooth and warm, flesh made into silk. The scars on Papa's cheeks had been 3 lines across his cheek carved with a sharp blade. He was proud of his marks. In the country of his ancestors, they made him into a man. I traced the I with my fingertip. This is my country, Mark. I did not ask for it, but I would carry it as Papa did his. And it made me his daughter. And it made me strong. I took a step back, seeing near my whole self in the mirror. I pushed back on my shoulders, and I raised my chin. Yes, my back straight as an arrow. The mark stands for Isabel. Huge character growth, guys. Just massive. The clock struck 11, and it made me jump. I had much to do and little time. Guys, if you go back to page 167, when grandfather's at the water pump with her, 167, go back and read that conversation. It's good stuff. The fastest way off the island was a boat. Much as that thought made me tremble, I searched through the sea of papers on the table until I found a chart of the tides. I ran my finger down the column. Huzzah! It's like saying hooray. The tide would not turn against me for a few hours. I lacked only a pass. Colonel Hawkins had been in the habit of keeping them locked in a chest in the library, but he had become sloppy and overworked since the rebel victories. And I put a marginal note about what I just said earlier, about how she set this scenario up. It's so cool. There, I grabbed the paper and dashed to a small side table for a quill and bottle of ink. I crowded the candles in close together to give me enough light. I took a deep breath to steady my hand, and I dipped the quill. I took a second breath and bent over to fill in the empty lines of the pass. New York, 1777. I wrote in 18th January in the blank space. It had been some time since I wrote out letters. The J wobbled and the R appeared to be an N. I sat down the quill, I wiped my damp hands on my skirt, and I picked it up again. This is to certify that whomever it is it may concern, 'twas the bearer hereof. That's where I had to write out my name. I scratched out Isabel, and then I stopped. I was not a Lockton. I was nor Finch. Isabel, Rhode Island? Well, that would not do. Isabel Cuff? After Papa? Isabel Dinah? After Mama? I closed my eyes and I thought of home. The smell of fresh cut hay and the taste of raspberries. Robins chasing bugs in a bean patch. Setting worms to work at the base of the corn plants. Showing Ruth what a weed was and what a flower was. So we're back to plants, guys. Did you catch that? Plants, flowers. I opened my eyes. I dipped the quill and I wrote out my true name. Isabel Gardner. Being a free Negro has the Commandant's permission to pass from this garrison to whatever place she may think proper. It was signed with lots of fancy titles that belonged to the Colonel and the Commandant and the King himself. I wish there had been a space for Her Majesty and Queen Charlotte of Great Britain to sign it too. She and me shared a birthday now, for I was reborn as Isabel Gardner, and I had the paper to prove it. Yes. Okay. All right. She has a new name. She has a new name for this new, confident, amazing Isabel. And the fact that all of these plant references and flower references are finally coming to a fruition, guys. So she chooses the name Gardner because she too shall grow and she too shall change and evolve as this new person that she is. So I have a big note here, and you'll see it when you look at the market pages. What is needed for seeds and plants to grow? Water and bees. So the water nourishes the plants, and the bees, which was represented as Isabel's confusion as she figures out who she is, are the pollinators. So all that chaos, all that time with those bees and all that madness in her brain was a necessary time for her to become the gardener of her own life. What a fantastic wrap-up of all of our motifs. It's pretty cool. So we've got water, bees, plants. Told y'all it was good chapters. The next two are even better. Okay, well, in their own way. Okay. Woo! Ruth is alive! Woo! Super excited. Okay. Woo! Team Ruth. Okay, all right. I'm super excited. Okay, I love you guys. We'll talk in class tomorrow. Okay. Bye. Don't give anything away. Don't post anything on the Teams room or anything, okay? Mwah. Bye.